We don't always choose the literature we feature on the Velshi Band Book Club based on what's happening in the news. For me, the Velshi Band Book Club has become something of a reprieve from the incredibly demanding news cycle. But this weekend, we chose a piece of literature with intention. I wanted to read something that brought the humanity back to a group of people that have been relegated to a mass deportations, mass raids, mass arrests, mass roundups by the United States government. I wanted to feature a work of consequence. In fact, today's work is called The Consequences by Manuel Munoz. It's a collection of fictional stories inspired, at least in part, by Munoz's own experience working in the fields alongside his parents and siblings as a child. Munoz's body of work, one novel and 3 short story collections in total, explores these stories, even included in a swath of removals from the shelves in some Arizona schools after a 2010 law banned Mexican-American studies. Broken down into 10 short stories, The Consequences takes place in California's Central Valley in the 1980s. The Frank stories depict Mexican and Mexican-American laborers, their families, their enemies, and their communities. La Migra, the informal Spanish term for U.S. immigration forces, hangs like a spirit over each story, sometimes seen but always felt. In 20 or so pages per story, the reader becomes connected to Munoz's characters. Children too young to be left alone, waiting on front porch steps. Hardened women, naive women, kind men who provide safety with a ride home, men with a secret. As in life, these different faces in the stories, just for a moment, build a rich world. The Consequences is masterfully written with subtle details, nuanced characters, and emotion that builds even before you realize it. The result is a deeply emotional work that can be read in one afternoon, but it's better taken in slowly, one story at a time. So as such, we're going to focus on just one of the 10 stories for this meeting. The story is called The Happiest Girl in the Whole USA. Griselda is our narrator and our guide. Early in the story, she explains how American farm owners call immigration enforcement to have them round up their undocumented workers so that the farmers don't have to pay the workers. Quote, "We all know what it means to watch the calendar turn to the last day of the month. We know what some of the farmers do on final Fridays. We know what to do on Saturday mornings." The farmers put their dusty hands on a phone receiver and very calmly place a call to the Migra. When the men in green uniforms arrive at the rows of whatever crops are in season, grapes or peaches or plums, and round up the men into vans, end quote. Griselda's partner, Timoteo, is one of the men who works in the fields. Griselda has gone to pick up Timoteo after a roundup many times before. She knows where to go. She knows how much money she needs to bring. She knows to wear comfortable shoes. When she meets Natalia, a young woman who's never made the journey to find her partner before, Griselda is confronted with a naivete and a vulnerability that makes her evaluate the person that she's become. At its core, The Happiest Girl in the Whole USA is a story about kindness and a reminder that sometimes the consequences of helping another person is rediscovering a piece of yourself. Joining me now is Manuel Munoz. He's the author of the book, The Consequences. He's a MacArthur Fellow. He's a professor of English at the University of Arizona. Manuel, welcome to the Velshi Band Book Club. Thank you for being here. I want to be clear. You didn't write this book because of the moment. You didn't write the book because all we're talking about is immigration. It's a series of stories, in some cases influenced by you and your youth and your family.
That is correct. This is my family history, and thank you for inviting me to be here and to bring some attention to the lives of people in my community. Yes, I'm 52 years old. This has been my life and my experience. I grew up working in the fields as young as a second grader. And it was an experience that was very common to people that I grew up with in my generation.
And so you've put real meat on the bones, because the problem with mass deportations or mass any roundups or whatever, is it takes the humanity out of it. It squeezes all the humanity out of who immigrants are, who migrants are, undocumented, documented, not a distinction that exists in the second grade for most people. Let's talk about the book. I want to talk about a moment in The Happiest Girl in the Whole USA, the story we're focusing on, when Natalia and Griselda are discussing how neither of them is married. Quote, "He's too afraid to marry me. Men are always afraid. No, I say, he's not afraid of marriage. I'm a citizen. I've been telling him for years that marriage would solve a lot of our problems. When he asks me what we have to do, I tell him we have to go to City Hall and get a license. And that's when he gets afraid. Like a lot of people, he's scared of the government. Everybody should be afraid of the government. Maybe in Mexico, I tell her, but I was born here. and I don't let anybody push me around. Natalia looks at me as if this revelation is beyond belief. There's a lot of story in that one passage, right? The story of, oh, he doesn't want to marry you because he's afraid of commitment or marriage. No, he's afraid of the government. He doesn't want to go to the office, get the license. And then Natalia saying, isn't everybody afraid of the government? And Griselda saying, no, I'm not.
Yeah, that's correct. It's, again, I come from a family that is of mixed status, and that is a shared experience for a lot of people. Some who are born here in the U.S. and some who have a family member who came over undocumented and has been here for many, many years, if not decades. But some of us have learned to negotiate all of the pathways that we have to maneuver in order to get what we need to support our own families. And Griselda, as one of these people, certainly has all of those tools at her disposal. So the story of her coming into contact with somebody who is naive and who gives into fear creates this moment where she has an opportunity to say, I think I know how I might be able to help somebody by sharing the knowledge that I've learned over the years.
I want to jump to a little of the end of the story without being a spoiler, in which you write 15 minutes. Just enough time to dream. Timoteo is already fast asleep, his head against the window, and I would do anything to rest my head against his shoulder, to nestle there. Ahead of me, the other women and their men face forward, together and stoic, all of them alert to the city streets, to what's passing by and what's coming. It's still love. The back of their heads seem to say to me. Not one woman is resting her head on her man's shoulder, so I sit upright and I look straight out into the distance. What is this metaphor?
I think sometimes, going back to your introduction about thinking about not masses, but individual lives, unique lives, it gives us license to start to remember and recall that each person has an inherent dignity, and the dignity of the emotion, whether that be love, compassion, kindness, is something that we don't always get to witness as much as we need to. And that's what's going to happen, I think, with hopefully when people come across Griselda, is that, she has a tough exterior and she has very difficult circumstances that she's trying to navigate. But in the end, she's also a human being, and she's thinking about the ways in which she can openly express things that are important to her. Showing love, kindness, showing tenderness. And that's just something that is pervasive, I think, in a lot of my stories. There's a term that goes around in literary circles, humanizing, but that's exactly what it's lending our attention to. We're unique individuals, and we are deserving of dignity and compassion.
And of the recognition of the complexity that you write about, right? Because so many, the stories in The Consequence grapple with choices that we all make that are nothing to do with your legal status anywhere, about kindness and cruelty or indifference. You are simply telling stories of people. It doesn't feel, there's nothing political in the agenda of what you've written.
Yes and no. I mean, on the one hand, no, but on the other hand, yeah. Meaning anytime we have a story going, I firmly believe once you hear a story, you can't unhear it. So storytelling, memoir writing, essay writing, all of those communications are inherently political. We're going to be able to share an experience and open the eyes of a reader who never encountered those particular narratives. So underneath all of it, it may not seem political, but the very act of confronting one human being and understanding their situation, absolutely.
That was the best answer to a trick question I've ever heard, because you're right. Everything we do is inherently political. It's who we are, it's what we believe, and it's the furtherance of those beliefs. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. What you just said can kind of apply to so many things that we're dealing with right now in life. So thank you for your book, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for being the newest member of the Velshi Band Book Club.